Welcome to or back to Mutant Memories, a series where I talk about my thoughts on the X-Men, other X-books, and other media in the X universe. This is the second video of my complete retrospective of the original run of the New Mutants comic book. In this video, I will cover issue number 1, the first official issue of the New Mutants, titled Initiation. It originally came out on February 28, 1983. So I want to apologize in advance. I was recording and I didn't realize that my cat was going nuts. I guess I was just in the zone. So you might hear him meowing in the background. He's fine. He just wants dinner. I wanted to do a slight content warning for mention of sexual assault. I really won't go into it too deeply until afterwards, and I will put a timestamp when I talk about it more. We start this book with Shan getting her hair washed and styled by Stevie Hunter, Kitty Pryde's dance teacher, former ballerina, and friend of the X-Men. The kids are getting along okay until Danny's power accidentally goes off on Shan and she sees before her and everyone else the murder of her father in Vietnam, where she hails from, and the assault of her mother and herself to protect her younger siblings from Thai pirates. Shan's mother did not survive the ordeal, but Shan and her younger siblings did. Shan attacks Danny in a fit of rage, and when Stevie tries to stop Shan from choking Danny out, Shan possesses her. Berto smacks Shan to get her to stop. Shan stops possessing Danny, but is inconsolable. Danny takes a walk through the X-Mansion while Shan calms down and finds herself in Kitty Pryde's room looking at Kitty's photos. She then wanders into Storm's room and looks at her plants. Danielle wonders what happened to the X-Men. She thinks about how Professor Xavier never talks about what happened to them. They just seem to have disappeared. As she is wondering this, Professor X mentally calls out to all the New Mutants and tells them to get in uniforms and go to the Danger Room for their first training session. There is a small interlude where Illyana and Moira speak to a woman in London, England, who is trying to get Moira to help her autistic mutant son. The woman knows Charles Xavier, and Moira questions her as to why she doesn't have Charles help him, because the boy in question has telekinesis and telepathy. The woman reveals she wants Charles left out of the treatment of her son because Charles is the boy's father. Cut back to the X-Mansion again. The test of the Danger Room is getting across the room. Danny watches the others in the Danger Room and is too nervous to go in and ends up running away rather than training. Danny decides to go sit by herself, and Rain comes up to talk to her, having tracked her in wolf form. The two of them begin to talk about how neither of them had friends before coming to the X-Mansion and their mutant powers. Rain admits to being happy while in her wolf form because she finds it to be a simpler state of being. Danny explains that her power often hurts people and she would gladly be rid of it. She explains to Rain that she did have friends once, but once her power manifested, they all abandoned her. Danny goes on about how she feels bad for having pulled some horrible memories out of Shan's head and make them visions for all to see. Rain says that Shan will forgive her and that Shan only got so mad because she was surprised. Danny goes on to explain that somehow her power showed her parents a vision of their own deaths. She says that her power to manifest visions showed her parents a bear attacking and killing a Palomino pony and an eagle. She explains to Rain that her mother was from the Horse clan and her father was from the Eagle clan. She goes on to say her father, a week later, packed up guns and a bow and went to the high country. Her mother insisted on going with him. Her parents left her with her grandfather and she never saw them again. Danny also tells Rain about showing her grandfather a vision of his own death as well. There's a honking horn in the distance and it's Stevie's car. Rain runs towards the car in wolf form and jumps in the back window, and Bobby, Roberto, is upset because he doesn't want his clothes dirty. Sam, Shan, and Bobby are driving with Stevie towards Salem Center. They ask if Danny is coming and Rain tells them she would rather be left alone. Unbeknownst to them, two shifty-looking men are watching them drive towards Salem Center. We find out that they somehow know Xavier has taken on new students, and they report to Henry Peter Gyrich. Gyrich is working with the United States government, and you are probably familiar with him from the cartoon or Avengers comic books of this time period, but he kind of pops up all over the Marvel universe. Henry tells the men that they are not to alarm the children and that he will let them know if this situation changes. We're told that Gyrich is pondering his next move. Meanwhile, Danny returns to the X Mansion and goes in the danger room. Danny says that she watched the professor operate the danger room and therefore is going to load up the training test she ran away from earlier. She goes into the danger room, fights robots, and makes it all the way across the room. But just as she exclaims, "I passed the test," she is hit by a powerful stun blast. We are shown someone in the control room at the danger room turning off the safety interlocks. Danny wakes up in a swamp she remembers, and a large monster is drooling over her. She realizes that what is happening is not an illusion, but real, and that is the end of the issue. My impressions when I read it a long time ago. When I read this originally, I liked it, but it was a little underwhelming. There are a few moments with Rain that I really did care for, and that I thought were really cute and fun, especially when she talks about how being in her wolf form is pleasurable. I thought it was interesting that she felt her powers were sinful, yet she could admit to liking them a little. When I originally read this, I don't think I gave it the attention it deserved because Ilyana wasn't in it much, and I was kind of single-minded at that time, and really hungry for Ilyana comics. And I did read these and I liked them, but I didn't pay as close of attention to them, I guess. Another thing I remember wondering when I read this is that if the horse and eagle clan that Danny mentions her parents being a part of are a real part of Native American culture, or if that's a real thing, or if it was just kind of made up for the comic book. What I think I'm going to do is I'm going to do another video just on Danny, and I'm going to really do a deep dive into these things that they mention about her heritage and where she comes from, and see if they're real or if they're just fiction. I think that would be interesting. I'll probably do that closer to the issues that make up the Demon Bear saga, because I feel like that would probably be the appropriate time to do that, because there's a lot more of it in those comics. But something interesting to think about, I guess. In the meantime, I'll do some research on that to get ready for that video. I don't really remember much about this issue clearly. Like I said, I liked it, and I thought Rain looked really cute, and I love the way that they drew Rain. Impressions and thoughts upon rereading. Upon rereading this issue, I was kind of shocked at the reveal of Shan's past. I remembered that both of her parents were dead, but all I remembered is that they were from Vietnam. For some reason, I never really thought about it much beyond that. I didn't remember at all that Shan's dad was in the army and that her parents died just a year before she came to the X-Mansion. I'm kind of guilty of doing what the comic books do to Karma. She's a really interesting character, but she doesn't really get a lot of thought or storylines tossed her way until the newer editions of New Mutants that they put out recently. I always really liked her, and I was always curious why she wasn't in half the comic books. I'm going to put a content warning here for mentions of assault. If you want to skip past the point where I talk about these subjects, I'll put a timestamp up on the screen that you can skip to. I was really shocked that I didn't remember Shan and her mother were assaulted by the TIE Pirates. Even worse, from the illustration, it looks like both Shan and her mother were both assaulted in front of her younger brother and sister. How awful. The bright and poppy art kind of lulls you into feeling safe, and then bam, that happens. I feel horrible for Shan. She not only had to relive that moment, but also everyone else in the room saw it happen. I do not blame her for snapping and attacking Danny. Right away, I think this issue kind of introduces us to the fact that New Mutants is going to have some heavy subject matter. I do not remember any of this sort of assault happening in X-Men up until this point. The only assault like this in comics wasn't treated as an assault, even though it arguably was, and happened to Miss Marvel in Avengers issue number 200. I might make a video about that issue of Avengers at a later time because it's a wild and pretty problematic storyline. Later in the X series, Rogue is presumably assaulted off-screen in Uncanny X-Men 236, but this issue is way after this issue of the New Mutants in 1988. So I think this might be the first time I really remember reading about this subject matter in a Marvel comic book. I cannot believe that I read this and forgot this happened to Shan. My only guess as to how I forgot it is that I was very young, and maybe I didn't quite understand what they meant, or I didn't really understand how serious assault is. So yeah, that really surprised me. Okay, this is editing, Aisling. So I remember now that Moira McTaggart's abusive first husband actually beat her into a coma and assaulted her, leaving her pregnant with her son Kevin, later known as the mutant Proteus, who had the ability to warp reality around him. I forgot about this completely while initially writing this, so I guess I was wrong, and there have been other sexual assaults in the X-Men. Something cool about this issue is when Moira goes to London, the woman who is seeking her help is the mother of David Charles Haller, or Legion as he is more commonly known. He shows up later in this series and in the X-Men and X-Factor, so that was a cool thing to see. Also, Illyana has a cool hat on in the scene. There were so many little character building moments that I really enjoyed in this issue. I really loved Rain describing her experience when she shifted into a wolf. She explains she followed Danny because she could smell that she was upset, which I found to be so cool. She explains that she can smell and taste things she never imagined, and she even admits that she has thought about remaining a wolf forever, but tells Danny she would never leave her friends like that. I also like when Rain just jumps through an open window of a car onto Bobby and Shan's lap. Sam tells a joke from the safety of the front seat about how Rain better not do that when she's full grown because she will smash them all. Rain is illustrated so well in this issue. She just exudes innocence and fresh-faced charm. She's really adorable. I like that they mostly look like teenagers in these early issues. Some of the later illustrators made them look too old, in my opinion. McLeod is not my favorite illustrator, but the initial depictions of the New Mutants are pretty great. I think this was pretty good for a first issue. It had some angst, it had some drama, it had some trauma, and it had some sweetness, and even a little action in the Danger Room. My rating for this issue would be 6.5 out of 10. That's about all for this issue. Tell me in the comments if you have read it, and if you have, what do you think? Stay tuned for more of this series and general videos about the X universe, and probably a lot of other stuff eventually too. Thank you for watching and have a great morning, day, or evening. See you in the next issue. Ashling out!